Welcome back. In this video lesson, we will talk about project failures. Why vast majority of projects fail? What are commonly reoccurring root causes of project failures? And the shift required to move from failure to success so that you can develop and execute projects successfully on a continual basis. So, project failure. Can you think for a moment about any project failure? That's right, plenty. On average, 2 in 3 projects fail. Did you know that when it comes to big mega projects like the one in the oil and gas industry, the statistics go as high as 78%. And less than 3% of companies successfully complete 100% of their projects. Less than 25% of companies conduct a strategic review for their projects to find out why they fail. So why some of those projects fail? 70% of projects fail due to a lack of early senior management involvement. Senior managers, being the key stakeholders often responsible for moving the projects forward, are not getting involved early enough. 30% of projects fail due to undefined or poorly defined objectives. 35% of projects fail due to changes in those objectives or in scope. And 57% of projects fail due to a breakdown in communication or just poor communication between the project team and key stakeholders, or even between different stakeholders. So you must agree, the statistics are horrifying, don't you think? Despite thousands of dollars invested by organizations annually in training people in project management, we aren't getting any better with learning how to produce good results. Why is that? So let's start talking about a project failure. How to define a failed project? Well, in a nutshell, a failed project is one whose results don't meet its objectives and it doesn't deliver what was planned on time and on budget. Let me give you a couple of examples.
Colgate beef lasagna.
I know that not everyone remembers that this company which is behind the toothpaste, introduced a line of frozen meals in 1980s, and in the hopes that people would eat the company's Colgate beef lasagna before brushing their teeth with Colgate toothpaste. Unsurprisingly, those meals failed really badly with the public. Most people don't want their lasagna to taste like toothpaste. And you look, it doesn't mean that Colgate couldn't make a really tasty lasagna that's delicious, but most people don't see it that way. Okay, so there is a phrase that I often use. Don't sell what you can make, but make what you can sell. And I think that framed this really well. How about Crystal Pepsi, which was a hit at first? And people were excited about a new version of an old favorite, which was in 1992. I know, a long time ago for many of you. But this product was impossible to sell, and it has never gained a strong market share. And this beverage was discontinued 2 years later. And as part of the Lessons Learned workshop, David Novak, who was the Chief Operation Officer, he admitted that he didn't listen when bottlers told him that Crystal Pepsi flavor wasn't quite right. And he later said that you have to recognize that when people are bringing up their issues, they might be right. So perhaps if Pepsi or Colgate had a system in place whereby they could evaluate at early stage how their product meet their customers' expectations, they could have avoided altogether spending tons of money or even cancel this opportunity before it moves to full production. So we will talk more about this system in the second module. Well, the last example I want to bring up is the Sydney Opera House. Is this a success or is this a failure? You can't tell from looking at it, especially right now, but the Australian iconic Opera House has actually been a study in project failure. Let me just give you a little history. The Danish architecture won the architectural competition, which was set up by the New South Wales government for a new building in 1957, and the construction started only 2 years later. The initial schedule was to build in 4 years and spend about $7 Australian million. However, it ended up taking 14 years to complete and spend over $100 million. The Sydney Opera House could probably be seen as one of the most disastrous construction projects ever. And not only from the financial point of view, but also from the whole project management. For example, the design plan was never completed. There was no defined project or development manager, poor leadership, underestimated budget, changing priorities, goals, changes in scope, and changes in objectives. However, after 14 years of constant redesign and underestimates and cost overruns, the building was open to the public. And it's hard to believe, but within less than 2 years, the building had paid for itself. Despite the project failure in a traditional way of speaking, it is actually a business success as we continuously miss that client satisfaction is also a project measure. Let's talk briefly about the oil and gas industry. So in oil and gas industry, over 78% of projects fail, and 2/3 of those projects have production attainment problems. So what does it mean is that they produce less than half of planned production for the first 2 years, and they are not doing any better in year 3 and 4. So if we don't make oil, we don't make money, even if the oil prices are high. So what is going on in these projects? What are some of the trends that we've been seeing? Look, the number one, projects are taking much longer than expected. Okay, projects became a way too costly, especially the oil and gas projects. And if you look at a lot of those investments, it might have been smarter to stop a lot of those projects much sooner. Projects often do not fit the market, okay, like Crystal Pepsi, where the quality of the product wasn't good enough, okay, or Colgate beef lasagna, which people wouldn't eat. And certain projects are basically not feasible. And a lot of those projects which we have right now, or we've had over the years, have a misalignment on scope and objectives. Look, that poor alignment between the stakeholders and project teams, which have been mentioned earlier, it's often due to lack of early planning processes that generate that alignment right from the start. So there seems to be a very little knowledge and understanding on how to use some of those smart practices like opportunity framing workshops, which are really the best smart practices for generating stakeholders' alignment, engagement, and clarity right from the assess phase. And another trend which we see is the pressure to deliver results fast. As soon as you start hearing that executives are saying, we need to get this development done quickly, it's a fast-track project, you are in trouble. I'm telling you, you are in deep trouble. You may not know it yet, but you will know it very soon. What happens is, very simply, because we are in a hurry, and by the way, I am not encouraging being slow, but because we're trying to do those projects at breakneck speed, we end up breaking our necks. And this is a problem where unless we start controlling our desire to do things so fast that we cut corners, we are going to fail. And we are going to fail pretty much every time. Because in mega projects like the ones in oil and gas industry, speed kills. So we try to go fast. And in fact, that forces us to go slowly, and that's because we make mistakes, and those mistakes cause us time in execution. So one of the things that that often happens, especially in the oil and gas industry, is that we hurry up and we're doing a poor job in the front end. And then we blame our contractors for doing a poor job executing those projects. But the fact is that contractors do good projects well and bad projects poorly. And it's the owner that needs to become responsible for that. So the question is, how could we move from project failure to project success? Well, we need to move from focusing on project management to focusing on management of projects, which means we need to stop chasing all our opportunities and move to management of projects, which is about choosing the right type of opportunities for your organization and making sure that you allocate the right resources to the right projects at the right time. The second shift we need is from execution to early project planning. Look, we need to stop rushing those projects, moving them to execute phase before we even understand what we're trying to achieve. So it's all about focusing on early project planning and spending time to understand the value proposition and aligning our key stakeholders upon what we're trying to achieve, all the way from the assess phase to concept, develop, and even execute. So what happens when you want to execute an opportunity while in fact your opportunity should be in assess or concept phase? Well, firstly, solutions at that situation are chosen far too quickly without investigating other options or without sufficient interactions with other stakeholders. And secondly, you allow decisions to be made on assumptions and you rely heavily on so-called expert advice and not investigating time with the team to clarify the purpose, the scope, and the objectives. So in those cases, in many cases, those opportunities have not been sufficiently framed. And in the oil and gas, we have a name for this, which is called the premature convergence. Look, this approach is one of the main reasons why so many engineering projects earn the reputation of being inefficient, expensive, and not reaching their goals. Opportunities start after a sloppy and rushed front-end loading with lots of loopholes that pop up later as surprises. And the management teams fail to pay enough attention to a key aspect, that is the people. So the third shift which we need is to focus on team effectiveness first before solving the technical issues. It is time to focus on developing effective teams, high-performing teams, and by really helping individuals to work together well, especially if there are cross-functional teams. So we want to help people to work together well so that they can solve any technical issues with more ease and they can become more productive. So how can we do it? Where do we start? Look, I've got for you 5 tips that if implemented well, can dramatically improve your team effectiveness. Number 1, as a leader, create an open and safe space for team members to express themselves fully, whether it's about them sharing their likes or dislike, or coming up with new ideas or other ways to talk about project. It's important that you show them respect they deserve by encouraging them to voice their concerns and speak up, especially at their team meetings and project updates. Secondly, involve your team members in the process of planning on a regular basis. Okay, and start by inviting them to opportunity framing workshops in the first and second phase. So stop relying on so-called expert advice and consultants and start using with your team smart practices such as opportunity framing workshops. The third one, invest time in clarifying goals, objectives, roles on your team, and your expectations. Make sure that everyone knows what they expected for and how they can get the job done. So be a leader that everyone wants to follow. And that applies to senior executives, project managers, and team leaders. If you want your leaders to grow leaders, show your leadership first. Be the kind of person that everyone wants to work for. So work on having an amazing attitude and create a self-image of a positive leader. And then you're going to become a magnet for highly productive individuals. And the last one, prioritize work-life balance. Stop demanding from your teams working after hours. It's been proven already that after 6 hours of work, the productivity goes down. So be realistic. And in fact, ask your team members, what does work-life balance mean to them? As you might be surprised what you can get. To recap, we've covered what project failure is. We went through some of those examples, the root causes of project failures, and also the fundamental shift required to move from project failure to project success. So the next module will introduce you to the winning game plan, the stage gate model. So let's get into this.